Hello, my name's Andrew Lowenthal. I'm from Engage Media. Oh, can you bring it up so actually I can see the notes, because it's just mirroring at the moment. My apologies. Don't do that to Wickham. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep people animated while we kind of deal with the technical issues. Any highlights from lunch? Any great conversations? No? Very private. Everyone sat in silence, meditated. There are many Australians here. Yes, that is true. And we're distributed around the room.
The session was very depressing. You can try to change the mood.
Okay, I'll try. I mean, these are small contributions, but, you know, small contributions many times over will make something larger. Okay, that looks like it. Great. Okay, so as I believe I said, my name is Andrew Lowenthal. I'm the executive director and co-founder of something called Engage Media, which is a little bit like Global Voices, except that we mostly focus just on Southeast Asia, and we predominantly work with video, but we would also consider ourselves to be a citizen media project and a citizen media platform. So what I'm gonna do in response to the topic around citizen responses to digital authoritarianism is build off what Mong and Professor Lo and the rest of the folks said that was often, I guess, a little bit, I don't want to say depressing, because I don't really believe in depressing, but challenging and very difficult about the context that we find ourselves in, and at least give you some examples of, you know, very tangibly how we try to do our organizing work based on some of the analyses that people have put forth. So just so you have a really quick idea of what we do, or at least what our kind of organizational goals, the organizational goals of Engage Media are. So we really have a focus on social movements, particularly working with media makers, activists, and technologists. We have a big emphasis on the use of open and secure technologies. Digital rights is one of our key focuses, along with Video for Change, and really trying to think about how we can intervene and make strategic contributions to the space of digital rights and video for change, and how people are thinking about those. So, as mentioned, these are our kind of two main areas of work, because we really kind of started, in some ways, doing both of those at once, because we came from a kind of open source, free software, Creative Commons background, and so that was the kind of principles that were built into the video sharing platform that we produced. So in terms of the why, I mean, part of the why comes from the session that we listened to earlier in terms of why do we do this work. A lot of the issues that we're interested in, including digital rights, but also things like climate change, migration, refugees, and global economy, are not confined to a single nation state. They're increasingly interconnected. So our responses, therefore, also have to be interconnected, as, you know, and so I think this aligns very closely with a lot of the work and or the broader philosophy of Global Voices as well. Initially, we began as a kind of cross-border project between Australia and Southeast Asia. Now most of our work is across Southeast Asia. Our staff are in the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. And our kind of main areas of work in terms of how we work around video for change and digital rights is through network development and field building, open technology, distribution, and that's predominantly around video distribution, capacity building, and research. So the network development, so building networks and building capacities looks like camps like Camp Chintuan. So we have a kind of strong emphasis on doing camps and taking people outside the city to kind of get them off their laptops, get them off Facebook, get them talking to each other, building relationships, and really trying to spark collaboration. So this was a gathering of documentary filmmakers from around Southeast Asia that we hosted in Myanmar a few years ago. This is a global network called Video for Change, which is a kind of formal network of organizations like Engage Media who are using video as their, I guess, their main medium, or one of their main mediums through which they're advocating for change. So groups like Witness, which people might know, Insight Share, groups in Mexico, Israel, Palestine, etc. And then CocoNet, which some people here, well, I think maybe only Don was at, but hopefully more people will be at this coming year. Don, I can see, is looking for himself in the image. If you know Don, spot Don, where's Don? You win a prize. The prize is, Don will tell you the prize later. So I'll go into CocoNet more soon. And capacity building. So that's things like digital security training. We do a lot of that work with journalists in particular, but also a whole variety of at-risk groups from indigenous communities, LGBT community, et cetera, or in some ways everyone is an at-risk community, I would say now, especially if we revert back to the previous conversation. Other work looks like Papuan Voices, so building capacity of indigenous filmmakers in West Papua and Indonesia to create and distribute their own content. So this was began as a program and then turned into its own kind of independent nonprofit that they now run themselves, and probably something actually that Global Voices could do very well, and they would do very well as well, to connect with more strongly really on the ground citizen video work that's going on in really one of the most hard to reach places that remain on the planet. And then also doing things like producing toolkits, resources for how to do video for change, how to think about impact and engagement, and particularly for people in what we might call, someone still hasn't come up with a better word for Global South, but I hope that is soon, and if there is one already, please let me know what it is. But people working with lower amounts of resources for who want to use video as a mechanism to promote social change, and the kind of ethics, a lot of ethics and kind of co-creation methodologies around how to do that. And then open technology, which obviously is a kind of part of our kind of digital rights program in many respects, but overlaps with our video work as well. So we're really big on utilizing open technology. So one thing that we did was we produced our own video sharing content management system. So this was actually what we started doing in 2005, was to write a content management system for people who wanted to upload and share their videos on the internet. So this is before, I think YouTube was starting around the same time. Obviously they got a bit bigger than we did, but we're still around. We also didn't have billions of dollars. So it works in a similar kind of way. You upload your video. Rezwan, who many of you know, is one of the curators of that space and has a strong emphasis on human rights, environmental, and other content. Someone's got a call. CK, incoming. Anyone? That's your phone. They hung up. Should I have answered it? If they do I call again, do I answer? No. Okay, sorry. So, and then that relates also to our internal systems, right? So we make sure we use Mattermost instead of Slack. We make sure we use Signal instead of WhatsApp. We make sure we're using Nextcloud instead of Google applications. We're running servers on Debian. We're using Redmine for internal project management and using PGP. So really trying to internally do a lot of this stuff as much as possible as well. And I think that kind of relates back to what Cedric was saying around the kind of convenience versus freedom. I think sometimes we also have to kind of be inconvenienced by some of these tools don't always work as well as, although some of them work better as well, I would say too, than the kind of corporate alternatives. But I think that part of that work, that hard work of kind of changing the context and kind of shifting the winds more back in our direction is this kind of, day-to-day struggle of just maybe having to make a little bit more of an effort. Not that people aren't making a lot of effort, but it's obviously we've got to pick it up. And we set the standards as well, because people will kind of watch what we do and they will follow more broadly in the space. So And then the other thing I was mentioning was around distribution and impact. So this is kind of our website, which is a video sharing site for kind of citizen video focused on Southeast Asia. So again, curating and collecting stories and really trying to make sure those stories get connected to social movements, campaigners, etc., so that they become a tool for those issues, whatever they may be. And that, I mean, the issues that we cover are the same kind of width or breadth that something like Global Voices does. We have a Lingua project, which we stole the name directly from Global Voices, Creative Commons licensed, right? But that is focused on subtitling. So that's a lot of work we do, because a lot of our work is trying to build kind of communications and coordination between different social movements around Southeast Asia, and also so people outside of Southeast Asia can learn more about first-person stories told in the first person from people from the region themselves, right? So the stories get translated into English or Spanish or whatever it might be out of Tagalog or Bahasa Indonesia or Burmese or whatever it might be. So, and then on the ground screenings, so we try to not just focus on the online and really think strategically about the offline spaces, so trying to get content off the internet, having conversations with communities, sparking conversations, because you really sometimes have to get up close and meet people if you're going to make some changes. Sometimes the internet will only go so far. So definitely a big proponent of some more old school methodologies mixed with some new school tech. And then so one example of that is a film festival that we co-founded in West Papua, again, with Papuan Voices. So it's actually the very first independent film festival in West Papua, the first one in 2017. Second one happened last year in Jayapura, and the next one will happen in Sorong in West Papua, if I can say that. So that on the really kind of mixing online and offline. And then finally kind of research work into things like open source video, but looking at things like safety of journalists in Indonesia and the Philippines, looking at impact strategies for video and how people are thinking about creating impact and measuring it, and what's being effective and what's not. And then actually soon we'll start a research project around AI and human rights in Southeast Asia, and definitely interested to talk to anyone who's also looking at some of those issues as well, and increasingly starting to try and mix those research initiatives with video outputs as well. So if you go on our site, you'll find a few kind of short video reports on some of those research initiatives. Okay, 12 minutes, 18 to go. So digital rights is, as I said, kind of one of our two core programs, just thinking again that Venn diagram overlaps very, very heavily with the video work as well. And I mean, as I said, we kind of started with a kind of open source or free software Creative Commons foundation, but we increasingly found, as I'm sure Global Voices did as well, that as we progressed and kind of were going around in that utopian kind of way of, oh, video on the internet will, you can change the world with some video, put it up here and there and da-da-da. That actually we were bringing people into this kind of web of surveillance. There were these like safety and security issues that people had to consider when they were distributing their content. Were they exposing people who shouldn't be exposed? So I guess the internet that we're more used to now, which is a kind of, I guess, less naive internet, it had to happen at some point, I guess. So we have this very strong focus as a result on digital rights in the region. And I guess our key strategic role in that is that we can bring in, I guess, a kind of one ring out, we might think of it, or people we think should be core in the digital rights movement. So journalists, artists and designers, technologists, and filmmakers. So a lot of our work is trying to really expand that space. So it's not a kind of, I think that it is changing, not necessarily just as a result of our contributions, but many people's, to really broaden that into a much more mainstream movement. So, because you're all asleep, or not so much so asleep, or that's what Nevin said, we can do a little quick exercise. We're going to do a quick provocation. So you have to get off your phone, and you're going to have to turn around or look forward, and you're going to have to discuss with the person in front of you or behind you, ideally in front or behind, because the person next to you, you probably know. If you don't have someone, you'll work it out. You're creative people. Using Facebook to promote digital rights is like eating McDonald's to promote vegetarianism. Is this true? Is this wrong? Is this right? Is this something in between? You have 2 minutes. You're going to talk to the person behind you or in front of you about what you think about this statement. Don't be shy.
You will want answers, right?
No, we're not going to get any answers.
Oh, no?
That's it. It's just a week.
Extra part. Translators will love you because they have a brain.
Because
No, because they don't have it. I see them.
okay, 1 more minute.
So,
30 seconds. $15 seconds. $10, 5. Okay. Thank you. Right, come back. Sorry to disrupt your conversations. Hopefully you met someone new. So now we're going to do 50 short report backs. So no, just kidding. Okay, so that's just to get you thinking a little bit more. I don't want this to be a full kind of lecture. At least we kind of take the edge off that a little bit and get you chatting and hopefully meeting some people. So for us, I mean, we're really interested in how we bring people together in our work and how we really think about relationships as being central to movements, right? So when we kind of do our initiatives, so this is Coconut again, and I'm just going to play the video in the background. So there's not meant to be sound. So this was an initiative, a camp that we did a year or so ago that brought together around 100 digital rights activists in Java, in Indonesia, but digital rights activists in the broadest terms. So filmmakers, journalists, digital security people, hackers, artists, traditional human rights people who hadn't really been exposed to the space quite so much, to really kind of mix up who was in the room. And we do it we get out of the city, everyone eats together, they hang out together, there's a lot of kind of extracurricular activities that really try to really fundamentally at the end of the day come out with a whole bunch of relationships that are going to drive further collaborations at the end of the end of the event, because that's what's, you're kind of trying to build some resonance to the event, right? So you plop the pebble in the pond, and then for how much longer do the ripples resonate? Do they travel? And how big are those ripples? So our kind of methodology is built a lot around trying to build those relationships. So this was kind of Coconut. You kind of see some of the statistics and the filmmakers, and the reading from the screen, and the people who attended. And so this is kind of core to our methodology, and I think links to what Mong was saying about kind of movements being, in some ways, where we're at. I mean, for us, we kind of had this time where the wind was at our back, in that period that Mong was also describing around, 2005, 2007, or also earlier. The internet to begin with was full of quite progressive people. Now the internet is much broader, and everyone is there, and it's a much different kind of space. So what's coming up is that there's going to be a second Coconut happening in October in the Philippines. Similar style, similar methodology. Again, trying to bring all those different people together. So, we need movements to pressure decision makers. 10 minutes. And we need relationships, organizing, and effective communications to build movements, right? So you can make movements online, but for me, they often they can be quite shallow, or they kind of come and they go and they come and they go, and they don't resonate for a long time. So how do we make our movements kind of resonate and sustain over a longer period of time, and in some ways shift our horizons to something a little bit further away, rather than, well, we're going to get enough hits on that tweet or that post or whatever it is to going back and eating our greens, in terms of Facebook being junk food, and our open source and open technology being the good healthy stuff that's going to keep us around and really fuel us for the long term. So what we're also looking at doing is how to kind of turn Coconut into something bigger, in terms of it being a web space for coordination, to have regular digital rights podcast, to kind of support collaboration spaces that we're not necessarily in control of it all, but we just kind of manage kind of Mattermost. So Mattermost is like Slack for people who don't know Mattermost. Kind of channels where people can facilitate conversations and collaborations, wikis, sub-networks, and especially kind of video content as well that we're quite interested in as a way of kind of inspiring and mobilizing people. And we're also looking towards Coconut 3 as a kind of broader festival that might involve 500 or 800 or 1,000, or we don't know. It will also depend on how we go with the fundraising, as always. But I guess in terms of where we're at, we're feeling like we need to massively increase the scale of the work we're doing. Like, from the previous session, it doesn't appear like, well, we're winning some things, but there's a lot of stuff that we're obviously not there. We've kind of got our heads in we have a headwind that we have to kind of move into, and so how do we kind of build some momentum to help us in that challenge, in that struggle? So one of the kind of related things that we're doing to that, to come to the videos, is really think about digital rights films. So last year, we made a couple of films with folks in Myanmar around the issue of 66D, which I think was mentioned earlier, and also around online harassment. I'm going to quickly show... Oh, wait. Sorry. Quickly show a little bit of that film so you can take a look. No sound? Oh, sorry, folks. Oh, I know why it is. It's because of this. Sorry, pick hub. Nope. Okay, we were swapping computers earlier. Oh, now we don't have anything. Whoop. Okay, let's get ready for those report backs. Who's up first? No? Okay. Actually, no, I'm serious. Someone say something. Anyone have anything interesting to say about Facebook and McDonald's? Shout it out. Don't be shy. Yes, so.
I have a counter statement to what you said, which is if you want to clean the water, you have to get your feet dirty.
So you got to get into Facebook. Okay. Good. Let's keep going with this because we don't have a presentation anymore. Anything else? Come on, help me out here. The tool reflects the character of the user. So we take ownership of Facebook?
But not in that business way, meaning take responsibility of our behavior from that platform.
Okay, yep, good point. Thank you. Hey. Okay, apologies for the sound or lack thereof, but just to give you an idea or flavor of trying to think about popular communications, particularly video, as a way to promote digital rights issues. So that's one example. So, let me just get back. I have how much longer? 5 minutes? Ooh. So we might have to skip provocation 2. No? Which was liberal democracies will protect us from digital authoritarianism. Really? Do you want 1 minute? You have 1 minute. Quick, turn to the person behind you. Start a conversation with someone you don't know. Liberal democracies will protect us from digital authoritarianism. In 1 minute. Include new people in your circle. Okay, you can continue that one in the coffee break. We'll have to come back because I'm running out of time. Okay, Sub, come back. I see you. Okay, so just because we're running out of time, Philip's got his eyes on me, so we need to move on. So when I was asking Mong last night what I should be thinking about in the last minute or two that I have, he said, are we being effective? Which I guess is a question, which I'm not sure how well I can answer. I think that if we're thinking in the Southeast Asian context, which is actually most of the context I work in, if you ask me what's happening in digital rights in Australia, I'm actually not very good at telling you what's going on. I think there are a lot of organizations out there. I think a lot of people doing very good things. I think there's a very strong foundation. I would say it's not really being maximized because they're, in terms of, I think there's a really deep need to scale this movement and this space, because if we look at the threats and the challenges in front of us, I mean, we're not where we need to be. Before we had a tailwind, and now we have a headwind. So in order to battle that headwind, we need to get more organized, we need to build more resources, we need to think of resources as not just as asking for more money, but think about the resources that exist within our networks and within ourselves already, all the time. Artificial intelligence is coming, which is probably going to make it much more difficult for us than for them. The difference in the playing field in terms of the technology is much more skewed than it was, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, in terms of the types of technologies we could muster and that governments or corporations could muster. But there's also a kind of an urgency in that sense. So I'm against optimism, but I'm also against pessimism. I liked what Ivan was saying before in that regard, that we have to kind of go beyond those in terms of how we think about this space, and not just it as freedom of expression, but something much more deep in many respects. It's actually about our being and our relationship to time and space and to other people. So I think we need to be basically going much bigger and asking for a lot more, breaking up tech companies. I'm a big advocate of asking for more than pennies from the corporations, who should actually be paying the billions of dollars of tax that they're not paying, which would pay for the media literacy and other things that they're often kind of throwing at civil society to help them fix. It's not enough of a fix. It's tiny in comparison to what they have. And also thinking about what we can learn from other movements. I was quite amazed. I'm not a vegan, but when I was in London recently, I was amazed to see how mainstream veganism was. I could walk up a high street and there would be all these kind of Leon and these other kind of very mainstream chains who were pushing veganism as a kind of way of eating and a way of living. I could never imagine that 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. So it seemed like a very fringe ideas. So the point is that whilst these ideas, I don't think these ideas are actually that fringe now. They're on the front page of websites constantly, issues around Facebook, our privacy, our data, surveillance. So there's an audience there. There are, more important than an audience, there are kind of citizens there who can really take to the stage and become part of a much, much wider movement. And I think it's those movements that we need to build if we're going to get anywhere. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And I'm going to invite the next speaker, Zhang Jieping, to see at another kind of response to digital authoritarianism.
Because I may conduct my presentation in Chinese, so if you cannot follow, please. Thank you. 好的，大家好。
Good afternoon. I'm from Hong Kong. I used to be a journalist for more than a decade. Now I am a founder of a new media technology platform called Matters. Today, I will not focus on matters. I would like to respond to the topic that we have today. When it comes to digital authoritarianism, maybe some people have some very tangible and visible images. For example, this was Stasi in East Germany. That was a secret police department from 1950 to 1990 that was operating in East Germany. Some people may have been there before. Now it's totally open to the public. I know that in Taiwan, you are going through the democratization process. You want to open up a lot of the secret files during the martial law area. So you want to know how people were surveillance in the past. I went to Stasi 3 times. And the last time was this April. And when I visited this April, I already started digital authoritarianism. So when I visit there this April, I feel very differently. I took these photos there, and in around 1970s, they operate like the scene. Secret police monitor those people in the blacklist. They would also monitor everyone in the society. Because of limited capacity, and they didn't have internet. So they use a very primitive way to monitor everyone in a society. They have secret police who will visit post office each Tuesday or each Wednesday, and they will just stay in the post office. They will randomly open mail to see what's inside. And after that, they will seal it back, and they pretend that no one has opened it before. And it's a very regular approach for them that lasted for decades. This strategy and this approach learned from the Soviet Union. So that's how Stasi used to monitor everyone in society. They use this regular visit in the post office to monitor and to include all the suspects in their blacklist. That's how they keep their surveillance system. Today, the system is very different. Today, it can be very straightforward. We don't need to monitor your mail or monitor your post office activities. Now we have digital data. Today, the surveillance is very robust because we have a lot of digital footprints online. All the data, all the information that you uploaded or you provide online can be monitored in a very centralized way. So, in comparison to the Stasi approach, authoritarianism regime in the world now is much more capable. It's almost like God. They have a godlike omnipresence surveillance. As long as you keep any records or footprints online, they can monitor. And I think that many of you are aware of this facial recognition system in China. Is a large-scale industry in China. Surveillance is a big industry, not just in the government side, but also in the private sector. Many private companies are developing these technologies and exporting them to the world. When it comes to digital authoritarianism, people would think about China. It's a very tangible and it's a very visible target. It has no limits in using technologies to monitor their people. So China is an immediate example that we can give. However, China is not an isolated other, because this kind of approach actually happens around the world. You cannot just put all the problems in a place that it seems to be irrelevant to you. We need to come up with solutions because these approaches will appear and will emerge around us. Today, the environment is very prone to digital authoritarianism. And China, of course, plays an important role in the process. So when it comes to responding to authoritarianism, especially digital ones, I want to go back to the fundamental level to identify the fundamental issue. So China may be the visible and immediate devil, but we do have other problems. So what has been changed in this world? I think that many of you are familiar with this map. This is how we understand the world now. It may be closer to the digital reality that we live in every day. In Apple cell phone, you can monitor how much time you spend on your mobile devices every single day. As a digital worker, I often spend 4 to even 10 hours on my mobile phones now. So now the national boundary is blurred in the digital world. In the past, we imagined ourselves as nation states, but the digital life can give us a better understanding and better picture how much time that we spend on Facebook, on Google, or on Baidu. So now the borders of nation state no longer apply to our digital world. And in digital world, these big tech companies actually have the powers to dominate or control us. So China has its own problem, but the problem is not limited to China because all these problems prevalent around the world. You have all these business, corporate, and commercial platforms that monitor and dominate the digital world. As long as you are using Alipay, you are using Facebook or Apple, all these tech companies are dominating our life. So we are not excluded from all these problems in the digital world. So all these problems that we are talking about today are relevant to ourselves personally. And that's what I want to say and what to tell you about today. This is why our world is very different from the world in the past. We can no longer see the world from a Cold War perspective because the distribution of information is different today than in the past.
And also, as we talked about digital platform, this is actually from the manga. And this is something I think that can illustrate the question I want to raise. It's like if we are the farmers cultivating on this piece of land, originally in the world of the digital, in the connected internet, maybe 20 or 30 years ago when it first started, maybe at that time it was easy for us to find our own piece of land, like the era of blogs that is reserved to us. We can build our own website, we can build our own Weibo, and we can open a channel of our own. It's like a internet farming. However, maybe over the past 10 years or slightly longer than that, the internet has been monopolized by no more than 10 countries. They divided up these vast pieces of land on the internet, and the piece of land on the internet became their assets. So we have something else to describe this situation. For example, it's like you're building a country. It's like a country called Facebook or a country called Google. And before you build up a constitution, you have lost your digital citizen right. You have sacrificed or surrendered your digital citizen right. And this is some challenge that is real for now. It's like we are compromising all the citizen right to these big tech companies. And it's because when you're using the smartphone, the browsing data, the things you do on your smartphone, how come these data are owned by Facebook, by Google? The ownership has not been discussed at all, and it just took place. It's like when you turn on the phone, you compromise your data to them. And it's like when we talk about how we divide the land to people, I mean, it should have gone through some discussion. So it's not just about political rights, but a lot of commercial rights, a lot of commercial companies, they're part of it. And none of us actually strike a contract. And it's difficult to say the drive or the reasons behind. And before we have the proper awareness of how technologies can change the society, it just took place. The data is owned by someone else, by some companies. And just exactly because we now have the digital right movement, and then we can utilize or leverage politics to do more surveillance. So number 3, maybe this painting is not that clear that you have this is not a carrot stick. It's a candy. They are using a small piece of candy on the land, attracting this guy in yellow shirt moving forward. So now on digital platform, we have a lot of surveillance, a lot of monitoring, and actually we can measure someone's emotion. Not only measure, but also predict, and also to drive, to mimic. And this is something very popular in the world. A Nobel Economic Prize winner, he said, or he describes that when our behaviors or emotions can be precisely depicted or measured, that means our emotions or behaviors will become a new war front for commercial entities or for political entities. And that means what will happen, or after that, there will be brainwash, that is, or a political control. And it's not just political brainwashing or agenda setting, it's like marketing or commercial utilization. For example, if you look at the self-development website on the internet, people are saying that you can make your consumers or your users addicted to your product. And what it means by getting people addicted to something, that is, you have some behavioral control or commercial control. And for those who want to make good business, whether it's for commercial profit or for political goods, it's a sense of control, because in the past, when we were not able to precisely measure your emotion or predict your emotion, then we have to leverage or depend on lobbying. We have to do something else to persuade you to cast your ballot to support any decision. But now it's like we are making up a scene. We are having some props convincing you, okay, this is out of your free will. You feel that you made this decision based on your individual or independent thinking, but actually you were attracted or actually trapped into it. So now, actually, if you look at the media, it's quite popular application. So this is a very popular experiment from the Netherlands. It's like you draw a fly in the bathroom, and if you have this drawing, it's not a real fly, but actually you can improve the precision rate of peeing, well, so to speak, by 80 or 90%. So it's like you're directing the discussion or in the public sphere. So it's like in the monitoring or surveillance of media in this field. I mean, from my experiences in China, I would say, if for the old era, the topic was censorship. For censorship, that is, we kill the truth. We kill those people who speak the truth. But for the new era, is that propaganda instead of censorship. Propaganda is more important for now. For the new era, the key is not what you say. It's what you say, can it be heard? So even if you say something, but it's not heard, then actually, no matter how important it is, if it's not heard, it doesn't matter at all. So if you want to control public discussion, or you want to control thinking, that is, they have to create lies massively in a huge amount, and then they direct the discussion in public sphere. And it's not just the Chinese government, but actually a lot of commercial companies, a lot of political agenda, a lot of campaign, whether it's for the profit of a company or a government. I mean, they're doing the same. It may not necessarily be lies, but they're fake news or something you just emphasize differently. So these points, as I mentioned, these are the things from my perspective you want to break through the threat of authoritarian. We do not really blame, okay, this is the result of certain country or which regime, but if we have to go back to the digital authoritarianism itself. I think this is from my experiences, based on my my years spent in China, also in Hong Kong. Well, I know in Taiwan is the same. In Hong Kong is that we are talking about the information war. We are talking about how this internet warfare will take place from the American President Trump took place. I mean, people have been talking about how, for example, the Russian Internet Army helped him win the place in White House. So all these phenomena, if you add them up, it's full of anxiety. You can say when we are confronted by this huge uncertainty in this new era, we need an enemy that is concrete. This enemy, if it should be a concrete and tangible. So we imagine them as the People's Army, PLA. So we have this image that they are the army and they are sitting in front of a computer distributing lies. Such imagination, we wouldn't say it's wrong, but it's far from enough if we understand things in this way. If you want to answer this question, I mean, maybe we should altogether think about it. If there's no information warfare, if there's no such thing, do you think you can really make the right decision? Do you think you can really neglect all the disturbances, all the addictions, the traps? Do you think, even though there is no information warfare, that you can still get full hold of digital rights? That whether it's a country or a company, whether they are waging a agenda setting or censorship, do you think you can really have the right decision, that you are not affected at all? And for me, maybe it's because I'm a journalist, and this is something very important last year. It could be one very important article, publicized article, that was in 2018, in March, in MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So there were 3 researchers that look into the data from Twitter. They look into the 3 million users, what they did in the past 10 years, from 2006 to 2017. And the conclusion is that fake news actually ran faster than real news. So for a piece of real news, I mean, it takes 6 times more time for the piece of real news to travel as far as fake news. So what's interesting is that in this research, in this report, a lot of people question them. A lot of people send them questions. And in this conclusion, actually, they try actually different methodologies. They try to exclude the boss, meaning the boss means the producer of the fake news or the internet army, and then they include the those boss I mean, they include and exclude, they look into the data, it doesn't really matter. Still, a piece of true news, it takes 6 times longer to travel as far as fake news. They exclude and include KOL, and the conclusion is the same. So these new data, these new statistics, I think it's a sabotage to the fundamental hypothesis in the United States on the freedom of expression. That is when the government laissez-faire, when the government just let the market compete freely, the truth will outperform the untrue. I mean, that was not correct from this research. This research, they use a lot of true data, and it proves in this data, I mean, when people speak on their own and there's no monitor, and in a complete free world, whether there's a internet army or not, whether there's KOL, whether there's a boss producing fake news. I mean, all this, if you look at the massive data on Twitter, it doesn't matter. The conclusion is the same, that a piece of real news, it takes 6 times more time to travel as far as fake news. And for me, that's simply adding up the anxiety that is I mean, my own conclusion, I can quickly go through these 3 conclusions. First of all, I think it's quite direct. And I think a lot of you have discussed this, like GDPR from European Union. For a public authority, they can use laws, acts, regulations to guarantee at least some parts of digital rights, to guarantee some some internet privacy, or these are some fundamental rights. This is what government can do. So that's what public authority in democracies can do. And GDPR is one example. They are covering mostly the data protection. So that will make you feel different. I mean, in Facebook and Google, there will be a lot of requests asking for your permission if you want to proceed. So this is after GDPR. And on the other hand, from the past attempts, that was GDPR, that's from the public authority. And I know in Taiwan, a lot of public departments are talking about how they can draft the policy. However, in the private sector, maybe for the companies, for example, this is from, I had this picture from a blog of a famous venture capitalist, and they're saying that tech monopolies are historically broken by adding an open source layer. So you can look at it. I mean, from the 50s, 60s up to now, the narrative now is that when we have this crypto network, so it could be blockchain or maybe some other open source data. Maybe we will bring internet to another level, and a lot of people are working together toward this goal. And what we mean by a new era is that that's not return to the era of monopoly of these companies. Whether we can have better protection or more friendly protection to user privacy and user usage. So how can we get back to the era when we can reclaim our right? So my attempt in this Matters Lab as a return to a company, I mean, I simply feel that by exporting good content, we can not really change anything. So we have this Matters project. This is just one page from the project.
这是我们其中
Matters is a platform that you can publish your articles and people can read your articles. They can discuss and have conversations in this space. It's like a medium or it's like a blog. However, Matters is different from all these platforms is that all the data in Matters are in the distributed networks. So no matter that Matters exists or not, no matter this platform is blocked in China or not, you can always access all this content through this distributed network. You don't have to go through our backend systems. For example, on the central to right-hand side, you can have a hash. and these hash will be unique to individual articles. Then there are many knots that can help you to distribute all this information across internet. So even though some of the channels may be blocked, you can still access and distribute all this information through these distributed networks. So this is an approach that we take that we hope we can go back to 10 years or 20 years ago in the internet when we were not monopolized by those big tech companies. I know that other people are doing this as well. We hope that we can give some of the rights back to our users. So Matters is one of the examples. And what can individuals do? I think there are a lot of things that individual users can do. It's not just a responsibility of public sector or individual companies. This graph is viral in Chinese world, and it says that you know nothing about those mysterious power. So if you want to change something, you need to be aware of it. You need to know what's happening there. In many countries around the world, a lot of people are curious and concerned about digital commerce or e-commerce. However, there are very, very few people who are concerned about the fundamental issues within the digital society. In our media world now, that people want to monetize digital economy, they want to monetize the digital channels or platforms, but only a few people are talking about the fundamental issues in the society. How does digital technologies influence our society in a fundamental way? If we only think about the commercial aspect of the digital world, you will have no ideas what's going on behind the scene. And you will always think that all these digital issues belong to other countries and other people, and there's nothing to do with you. But I think it's important for us to understand that all these issues are relevant to ourselves, and you need to take proactive actions. And as I said, there are many things that you can do as individuals. Education, of course, is very important. Media literacy is very important. When Internet gives the power to every single person and every single user. Everyone is responsible to do three things. You need to have self-control of your information. You need to manage your own emotions. And in many countries, there are media literacy programs and lessons. Everyone is now distributing information. So every one of you is basically a media outlet. You are receiving and distributing a lot of information online. When we talked about fake news and how to respond to fake news, it is important that every single one of us need to identify which one is fake news. You need to have the critical thinking capabilities. Otherwise, you cannot really rely on any institutions or organizations to filter out information for you. And I think emotional management is important. Now, social media is prevalent around the world, and social media actually abusing a lot of emotions within us. And many media outlets are trying to trigger your emotions. You are trying to use certain words or certain phrases or certain images that will trigger certain kind of emotions. And if you can trigger that kind of emotions, these posts or these articles will go viral. And it's a way to induce certain emotions. But you need to manage your own emotions. So this kind of management is very important. Last but not the least, you need to have the data awareness. Nowadays, it's almost impossible to retrieve the data that you render to the tech company. but you need to be aware at least that you need to know that what kind of informations they are taking from you from the backend system. You need to be aware that when you open a certain applications or certain websites, you need to know what kind of data that you are giving away to the tech companies. As a digital citizens, this is some of the fundamental approach and fundamental aspect that we need to do as individuals. I think, in conclusion, the world is very complicated. It's not just a threat coming from a specific entity or from one country, but every one of you is responsible for the phenomena. No matter you are a country or a commercial company or individuals, everyone is responsible. Thank you very much.